Atlanta Soul Zen Center, November 25th, 2018. We are remembering Matsuoka Roshi today, the founder who started the American branch of his lineage, coming to America in 1939. And so he was here before the war. He was known as a bridge builder, peacemaker between Japan and the U.S. We've done research, or we're putting a documentary together on him. It turns out he was not interned in the camps, which we thought he was.
Really?
But the FBI report on him shows that he was under supervision. He had to report in to somebody every week. There were a lot of priests apparently who were coming over as spies, the American government suspected during the Second World War. And his being a priest, he was friends with some of the priests who apparently were engaging in some sort of marginal or nefarious activities. Not for sure about those stories. But he had a mission to America, and we think that we're propagating that same mission today, which is the propagation of genuine Soto Zen, as brought to Japan by Dogen Zenji, who was ordained in Renzai first, which was the prevalent form of Zen practice at the time, but in his mid-20s went to China and brought back a Chinese form of practice which emphasized upright seated meditation as kind of the Buddha's seal, the seal of Buddha, and the Genjo koan, the koan of everyday life. So Matsuoka Roshi was very strongly in this tradition. Soto Zen, named after Tozan and Sozan. We just went through the Busarai, so we named Tozan, Tongshan in Chinese, in that, as well as Matsuoka Roshi's father, who was his teacher. The last name Zentai, Zentai, I think it was, before we came to Matsuoka Roshi, or we said his name 3 times at the end, was his first teacher. It was tradition in Japan that you would have 3 teachers. Matsuoka Roshi explained you'd have one as your initiation teacher, who would go through what we call jukai in Japanese. Then you'd have a training teacher, and then you'd possibly have a 3rd teacher, usually a 3rd teacher, who would do your transmission ceremony, shiho transmission, final ceremony, where you're entrusted with the Dharma yourself. So he was, Zen teachers were few and far between in the 60s when I met Matsuoka Roshi. So he was all 3 for me. Then later I went through formal ceremonies with Shohaku Okamura of Soto lineage, but of the Kodo Sawaki lineage, who you might have heard of, Kodo Sawaki Uchiyama Okamura. So we are very fortunate to have both the Matsuoka lineage and the Kodo Sawaki Uchiyama lineage combined. And we have a kind of a dash line to Shunryu Suzuki through Barbara Cohen, who was my preceptor. So the collection of Sensei's talks we promote every year at this time, and we urge you to buy a copy if you haven't. This one is being studied on our Tuesday night. This is the Kyosaku. It's named after the stick that we use to correct posture and strike the shoulders, which was important enough to Matsuoka Roshi. He devoted 2 talks to it, which are two sections in here. There's also Zen Can Bridge East and West, which is an example of his bridge building, peacemaking kind of efforts. There are 2 chapters called Zen Can Bridge East and West, because he gave 2 different talks at 2 different times. These are from the 60s, 70s into the 80s, and then Mokurai, that's a collection he put together during his lifetime. We never got it published until after he died, unfortunately. But then this is a collection of his later talks, and from the 80s into the 90s, that I put together in a similar kind of organizational scheme as that collection. Mokurai, it means silence is thunder. This is where we get our Silent Thunder Order, named for a Silent Thunder Order. Also means stillness in motion. It has kind of like a resolution of opposites, I think. It's an ancient Chinese term. So those are available. We have a little sort of gift store fixture out there in the front with some of these items on it, and some other items if you would like to buy something for a friend of yours or somebody. This is the Soto's in-service chant book that he handed out in Chicago when I was there. This is actually a reproduction of it, a reformatting of it. Oh, I'm sorry, I have the wrong one. Nope, erase, erase is one of my bosses used to say. When they say something stupid, they say erase, erase. I thought that was a chant book that we featured last week. So the whole month of November, we feature Matsuoka Roshi's talks, as November is our Founders Month. He was both born and died in November. So this is the last talk around Matsuoka Roshi. Next month we will be focusing on Shakyamuni Buddha. Rohatsu retreat is the second weekend. I believe it's the 6th, 7th, or 7th, 8th, and 9th, something like that.
6th through 9th.
6th through 9th. So it's a Thursday night. People come in from out of town. All day Friday, Saturday night. Again, we sit up all night. And then Sunday morning, we go home, take a nap, come back for Sunday morning. So please plan to come to that, any part of that you can, any or all of it. I have a few handouts that I'll give at the end here. These are The Purpose of a Zen Life, which is a reformatted talk from one of these. It's been kind of formatted in a magazine style. It's an effort that some of us are making to republish these talks as kind of a Zen reader, where those of you who've read some of these have noted that he had little anecdotal stories about what was going on at the temple that day and things like that, that sort of interrupt, if it's a reader type format. So we're repurposing some of his writings into the form of a reader. I've got a couple copies of that we featured this month. I'll pass those out, anybody wants to take one home. And then for comparison, I've got a couple of print copies of my Dharma Bite for this month, which is an unusually long one. Goes on to 8 pages instead of the usual 4. And I'm showing just the facts, ma'am. It's about the who, what, where, why, and when of who we are, what we are, and and how we can live with not knowing the answers to those questions. So that's this month's Dharma Bite, and I'll pass those around later. You're welcome to take those. And there's a little section out of the original Frontier that we featured also this month. And there will be one copy of Study the Self, which is the talk we're going to feature today. Okay? So, does anybody have any question before we start about any of that?
Just letting you know we have 15.
Say it again?
We have 15 minutes to get through till noon.
We have 15 till noon? We're only 15 minutes till noon? Where did the time go? Oh, the ceremony. Well, that's too bad. You're going to have to sit here till 1 o'clock. We'll make this quick. Okay, so Study the Self, as some of us recognize, is a phrase from Master Dogen's Genjo Koan. Bindo wa was a talk about the way. I mean, something like a talk about the way. And Genjo Koan was a section of that was pulled out and put in liturgy. So it's something that we chant from time to time. Very long. It's a very long one. And in there, he has these 4 famous phrases, which I call the 4 transitions. And so Matsuoka Roshi, this was September 1st, 1964. That tells you how old this is. So Dogen Zenji once said, and Okamura Roshi said when he got these, I gave him copies of these books, he said, Matsuoka Roshi wrote these books, right? And I said, yes, I didn't write them. I just published them. He said, he wrote all this. And he said, well, then he had to translate all this himself because none of this was translated at that time. So he got a lot of respect for Matsuoka Roshi as a scholar and his ability to translate and teach in English, which I'm dumbfounded by. I can't imagine teaching in Japanese, especially teaching Zen in Japanese. Would be just impossible. But he and the other early ones, are to be admired for their ability to do that. And I think Matsuoka Roshi had a special genius for understanding the American culture. His mother told him, go die in America. And he did. But he became, in the meantime, he became not really Japanese anymore. When he was here, he wasn't really Japanese. The Japanese community didn't even like him because he wouldn't be a temple priest. He wasn't willing to be a temple priest. And He was interested in us, who were really interested in practicing Zen. That's what he was here for. That was his mission. So there was some misunderstanding there. So here he's quoting Dogen. To study Buddhism, which means he was translating from 13th century Japanese. That would be like our reading Chaucer and understanding it. So to study Buddhism is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be enlightened by all things. To be enlightened by all things is to be free from attachments to the body and mind of oneself and others' selves. Now, other translations translate that slightly differently, but it's basically going beyond, dropping off the self of body-mind and the self-body-mind of others. So then he goes on to say, if you study yourself, you do so through wholehearted Zen meditation. Zen meditation is the very life of Buddhism. Regardless of the sect, meditation is its foundation. The historical Buddha sat in meditation 2,500 years ago and became enlightened. His followers since those days have sat in meditation, whether in India, China, as far south as Burma, or in Japan, and of course Korea. In Zen Buddhism, meditation is also paramount. It becomes a vital way of living that is not separated from our daily lives. But Zen meditation is not necessarily easy. For some people, it is torturous to have to sit for only a few minutes in silence. Their minds and bodies are not at rest within themselves. They can only be at peace if they are moving about, saying something and doing something. In Zen meditation, it is necessary to sit for a length of time in absolute silence. Even though your mind may not be calm at the onset of meditation, after you have practiced for some time, mental quiet will become part of your life. It will soon be natural for you. Zen meditation also has many fruits. It will give you many benefits. Yet you must put your whole effort into meditation for them to come to you. You must even practice meditation and then forget you are sitting in meditation. You must not seek the benefits that are to come from it. You are to make an effort to clear your mind of the desires and attachments and fears and worries that tie you to a materialistic life of suffering. If you wish to rise above a life of the world and of sorrow, you must toil hard. You must put your whole self into meditation and put your whole self into anything you do. So this is something I heard him say over and over and over again. And he would also say, if you can put your whole self into the simple act of meditation, you will gain the power to put your whole self into everything you do and become the strongest person in the world. And he'd use examples like Willie Mays catching the fly ball for the umpteenth, thousandth time, and then one time he misses it. What happened? He was distracted by something. Mental error is what you hear in sports all the time. So this is a very simple point that we all understand he was trying to make. But just sitting still enough, long enough, newcomers can be understandably skeptical. This is it? Just sitting. It's too simple. But he goes on to say, enlightenment is contained in Zen meditation. Meditation is not a means to an end. This is why it is important that you practice Zen meditation whenever possible and often, at least daily. It is not just sitting but he doesn't put a time limit on that. He would often say, sit 5 minutes Buddha. Right? But sit a half hour, Buddha for a half hour. And he'd often say, wouldn't you rather be a Buddha all day? Of course, we can't sit all day, right? So being a Buddha, being enlightened, having this kind of stillness come into your life and having insight is not really, does not really require that you sit in meditation all the time. In fact, Bodhidharma said you can't even really connect it with meditation, causally. You can't establish a causal connection between sitting in meditation and this kind of insight. However, most of us need to sit in meditation to get rid of our own ideas. That's why it takes so long. It's not that enlightenment is not accessible to us. It's just that we're already so full of our own opinions. We're full of it, right? So it is not just sitting in relaxation, although it rests your mind. It is begun with a pure motive and a firm determination to sit in meditation without desires to accomplish anything. This is Dogen, sitting without relying on anything, making effort without aiming at it. So sit in meditation without desires to accomplish anything. It is begun in surroundings that are clean and quiet, with as few noises and disturbances as possible. Your mind should not be limited by thoughts of good or bad, right or wrong, past or future, or by anything. You should also forget that you are practicing Zen meditation. So you can hear echoes of Fukan Zazen Dogen's tract in here, those of you that have read it. So he goes into some instructions, but one thing that's interesting about this particular talk is he enumerates several things that you should take care of, such as choosing a clean and quiet place to meditate at home. Should not be too hot or too cold, and so forth. These are all, you can hear Fukan Zazengi here. Then he says, this is a social level. Beginners should avoid association with persons who like to argue and debate about things, especially Zen. Zen is not to be debated. Its depth can be lost in the splitting of a literary hair. So this is where Zen comes off as anti-intellectual, because scholars are splitting hair after hair. I mean, that's their job. That's what they do, and that's how they get their promotions and jobs, and so we all know that. But that in Zen, that's not appropriate.
Why is Dharma combat a thing?
Dharma combat is putting the hairs back together.
But you debate. But you're still kind of debating, right?
I don't think so. If you look at the classic rules of formal debate, which some of you are more scholarly than the rest of us know, nothing we see that's called a debate today is really a debate. There are rules. There are rules about how you debate, and you can win a debate. If you go back to Nagarjuna, who was the 14th in India, halfway through to 28th Bodhidharma before he went to China, Nagarjuna, his followers, and all those people at that time, they were the real debaters in Buddhism. But the purpose of their debate was they didn't make any assertions themselves. They were called Madhyamikas, Prasangikas. One of those words means do not make assertions. But they would take on anybody who would come and make assertions about anything. And they would demolish those assertions. So the person that was debating them in public had their underpinnings pulled out from under them. And they probably were embarrassed in front of the crowd, but at the same time they went through kind of a cognitive dissonance. This was the whole point, where they had to have a realization of some kind. So the purpose was benign. The purpose in the debate was to help this other person who held what we would call wrong views, or held limited views, to free them of those views so that they could see the truth of Buddhism. That was the whole purpose. Look at what we call a debate today. It's just mudslinging.
No, but like Dharma combat, when we sit down,
yeah.
And we are still unsure. I guess that's not a debate. We're asking a question and you're clarifying.
Yeah. It's different from a debate.
Quick question.
Yep.
So, I know, might go off time. They say, I read this one. You can attain enlightenment with intellectual, like these, keeping these intellectual thoughts and, like these, you have to basically practice meditation and realization. I was wondering, what is there in this kind of debate, intellectual debate, that is basically the root cause that is hindering the realization of the trueness of oneself or what?
So I'm trying to understand your question. What is there in the realization?
No, I just want to understand what is the fundamental thing in the flaw in the intellectual debate that is basically hindrance to self-realization?
Is a hindrance? What is basically a hindrance?
What's the hindrance in the
Intellectual debate.
Yeah. Actually, according to classical Zen, there isn't any. There's nothing wrong with using your intellect. It's how we use it, and the way we use it is to reinforce self-identity. So if I'm in a debate or we're doing Dharma combat, and my purpose is to make myself look good, compared to whoever's coming up and confronting me with a question or whatever, then I've lost, right? From the beginning, I've already lost, because I'm using my intellectual skills to a purpose that's not worthy of your intellectual skills. But if you're using your intellectual skills to crack open the puzzle, for everybody's sake, then wonderful. And there's nobody more brilliant than Nagarjuna in the history of Buddhism, except maybe Buddha himself. So the old Chinese poem says, to move in the one way, do not reject even the world of senses and ideas. Indeed, to accept them fully is identical with true enlightenment. So this sounds like, that can't be Zen, right? But we're so accustomed to trying to overthink everything, think our way through everything, think our way to enlightenment, that in the beginning we say, set that aside. That's not going to be much use here. But once you get to the point that you've had some insight, then in order to say anything about it, to do expression, there's experience and there's expression. So we say intellect can get in the way of experience because you're explaining everything away too much to yourself. And instead of opening up to weird experience, you might say, you're explaining, But once you have insight, then in order to do expression, where you try to teach about this, then the intellect is very important, because it helps you understand the audience, it helps you understand the culture. Like Matsuoka is a genius in translating from a Japanese culture to American culture. I mean, he's not just saying Zen stuff in English here. He's saying it to an audience that is an American audience, and he's saying it in appropriate ways. So his intellect is very much alive and well here in what he's accomplishing. Now, this is a big misunderstanding of Zen. Zen is not at all anti-intellectual. In fact, Dogen called it developing true intelligence. So anyway, keep your leisure hours for meditation. Do not practice immediately after meals. This is Hakuin. So there's a nice list of 8 things there, and then these rules apply to your body. But in Zen meditation, your body cannot be separated from the frame of your mind. There are also some rules applying to the disposition of your mind as you begin to learn and practice Zazen. These are: do not think of either good or bad, right or wrong during meditation. Now Dogen says that, but he doesn't say during meditation. So everybody misunderstands Dogen to think in daily life I shouldn't think good or evil, right and wrong. We're confronted with it all the time. So it's taking a prescription for practice that is meant to be applied when you're in meditation. You suspend judgment for now, right? And trying to apply it to daily life where it doesn't apply, doesn't fit. So there are descriptions of reality that we have in these teachings. There are prescriptions for practice that we have in these teachings. And sometimes they're combined. The Four Noble Truths are both descriptions of realities and prescription for practice combined. So anyway, I think these are, do not be anxious to be enlightened or receive benefits from meditation. Do not desire to be a Buddha. You can hear echoes of Dogen in here. So anyway, I'll make these available if anybody wants. There's 2 copies of Study the Self.
Are
And
those in the book?
they are in the book. These are in the book. But anybody who doesn't have the book, you can take some of these as teasers, if you will. And we'll pass those out. So how are we doing on time? Are we over?
Right at 12 o'clock.
Okay, well, let me just read briefly the talk I gave, the first memorial service for Matsuoka Roshi in 1997. That's the year he died. And this memorial service was on November 30th of 1997. And he died, let's see, what was his, I can't remember the actual date. I think it was the 25th or 20th. Yeah, 20th is when he died, so this was 10 days after. So this is a quotation. I just quoted this, and then we talked about this from An Introduction to Zen, which is another one of his talks that are in these books. Emptiness, in quotes, is the same as the absolute, but it is important not to confuse this with a God. A God. In Zen Buddhism, there is no God. Only there is the constant change of the universe and the law of cause and effect. And call that God if you want. It's just a head upon a head. It's an extra word. But if God is everything, God is anything, God is everything, fine, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. Semantics, right? In saying emptiness is absolute, we mean that an experience of emptiness is to know the absolute reality of the universe and to know that everything is one. Objects are not distinguished between in their reality. Now that's a very interesting English construction, right? So even though this object, called a lectern, is different from that cushion, right? This teaching is saying that, yes, that's true, but there's a way in which they are connected, right? So one who has experienced this truth has entered nirvana or has become enlightened as a Buddha. Again, Buddhas wake up. In daily life, one is not hampered by anything. One is free and yet abides by the utmost concern for the rights of others. When a person's mind becomes empty, an awareness of the oneness of all things enters into it, and one no longer is limited by thoughts of self. One then acts with spontaneous freedom that is in complete harmony with the world of which one is a part. All one's power can be put into each task. Although one lives a daily life in this world, one does so as a Buddha, as an awakened one. By this time, you may be able to tell that in Soto Zen, we do not distinguish between this life we are presently living and a life after death. We do not separate our body and its consciousness, personality or spirit, and we do not mention a soul, in quotes. We are only concerned with how we live in this moment. Zen is not apart from life, like a treatise or doctrine in an orthodox religion. The potential to be a Buddha and the power of Zen lies in each person to be discovered by meditation and faithful attention to the tasks of everyday life. Zen is action in harmony with the rhythm of the universe. In Zen, we believe that this truth can be found within ourselves. We do not put our faith in the Buddha because he is not a god, but rather a fine example. We do not rely on anything outside of ourselves. Zen is seeking a world free of suffering in this life and not waiting until an afterlife. In Zen, we do not concern ourselves with life after death. We only believe in becoming Buddhas in this life. There are many Buddhas, and everyone has the potential within to become one. A Buddha is an awakened and enlightened one. So that was what I thought was the most important thing to say that he had said in his first memorial. So, just a few more questions and then we'll wrap up, because I know you all have schedules.
So sometimes, I want to, convince my friends to come to practice with me, and I don't want to tell them what the benefits are because I don't want them to start with the idea that they're going to gain something from the practice, but without that it's kind of a hard thing to sell.
It is. It's a hard sell.
Do you have any suggestions?
Well,
I always sound really ridiculous trying to sell it. I'm like, we're just going to sit and for 30 minutes staring at a wall, and don't worry about gaining anything about it, but yeah, do you want to come?
and if you get bored, they'll hit you with a stick.
Yeah.
It's called bait and switch, I think is how you do it.
It's what?
Bait and switch.
Tell them we have tea and cookies later.
Well, what we recommend, and we haven't done a good enough job of this, we recommend that you just bring them to the 11 o'clock talk.
Yeah.
And they can ask whatever questions they want.
Mm-hmm.
Or,
The worst thing would be to try to convince them that Zen meditation works before they experience it. Most people, when they sit down for the first time, even for the newcomers, 15 minutes or so, most people say, that was really, something. And then, of course, that changes and wears off, and the novelty wears off.
You can ask them to come to Wednesday. Have you come to Wednesday night?
Yeah, usually, and since I'm helping with the Wednesday, I think that'll be a draw for some of my friends anyway. But
Yeah, that's a natural thing. Just bring one or two of them along with you at a
That's the
time.
gateway drug.
yeah, it's hard for me to convince them because I know it's a hard practice, and I think that a lot of people just want an easy subscription to things.
Well, since I said it's not up for debate, and he'd also say you can talk all day and never make them understand. So ours is very much a do-it-yourself kind of practice. You have to do it. It's like most things in life, like music or anything. You have to do it. And if you don't do it, you're not going to understand it. You know, somebody can tell you how to ride a bike until you're blue in the face, but until you get on a bike and ride it, you're not going to learn to ride a bike.
I have a question. Go ahead.
A little louder, the fans.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You started the discussion by talking about Genjo Koan, and you mentioned where Dogen says to study the self is to forget the self. And I was wondering if you could maybe explain what that experience is like, if you can explain it, to forget the self.
I think we can all, most of us can remember it from childhood. You know, when you were a child, you were walking around and, you know, you hadn't really formed a strong self-identity yet. They say you begin individuating in the crib. You begin separating yourself out from the crib and from mom and from the room. In the beginning, I think Freud called it oceanic awareness. Just like everything is just energy, just a swirl. You can't discriminate anything from anything else. Just one big ball of wax. But when you're a young child, you don't have the language yet. You don't have the concepts yet. You don't have the worldview yet that your parents are trying to inculcate in you, and your peer group is working against your parents trying to inculcate a different worldview in you. You don't have that yet. You know, you're 3, 4, 5 years old. You're fully conscious. And at that point in time, you have a very open mind. You know, you're open to everything. But you're not yet, you know, categorizing and sort of defending yourself against everything. They say that our brain finishes hardwiring when we're in our mid-20s. About the time Dogen went to China, Matsuoka came to America. About the time I met Matsuoka, mid-20s seems to be a critical kind of point. And they say that before that, the reason they recruit 18, 19-year-olds to go to war, they don't have any sense of mortality. That part is the last part of what the brain puts together, apparently, and you become aware, oh my, this is not like a movie, I'm going to die. So, you know, I think those are, so what we're doing in meditation is, in a sense, returning to an original state of mind, rather than developing a new one. Make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Sorry, we're almost done. Okay. Okay. During the talk, you were mentioning what Bodhi Dharma was saying. I nearly forgot. During the talk, you mentioned something that Bodhi Dharma said.
Yeah, you can't connect a causal relationship between Zazen and insight.
So, can you explain that?
Yeah. It's said that people were fundamentally enlightened by nature when we lived in the jungle, you know, when we lived in tribal situations. But we're so civilized now, we're so protected, we have so many walls around us, not just the physical walls, but all the cultural and others, you know, that we're very, very far removed. We don't go out and kill an animal and skin it and, you know, gut it, and we go to the grocery store and buy lunch meat, you know. We have packages between us and reality. So we have to do something special. We have to sit for long periods of time facing a blank wall. It's kind of pathetic, you know, if you think about it. But the assumption is that people were more enlightened in more primitive situations than we are. Well, that's one piece of it. So, does that make any sense? And can you restate the question a little further than that?
No, I was saying.
Bodhidharma said you cannot. He said, first of all, he said you don't have to do zazen. Nobody can tell you have to do zazen in order to become enlightened. You can't make that connection. He said, but when you do zazen, you know, here are the things you observe: the physical sensations, mental mood swing, emotional mood swings, etc. So he went through the 4 things we observe, breathing and so forth, while we're sitting. So he was obviously doing meditation, showing everybody else how to do it. But he said you can't prove that you actually have to do meditation in order to be enlightened.
Oh, okay. So
and the way we think of it is over time you become concentrated like a supersaturated solution of salt, where at one point you turn the Bunsen burner off and you drop in a crystal, it changes state, changes to a crystal. So the guy sweeping the sidewalk and the stone hits the bamboo, bang.
Yeah.
The frog jumps into the pond, splash, Bashalinas.
Yeah.
So they had become ripe and ready, supersaturated through their practice. They had become concentrated over time. So when something happened, it triggered an insight. Make sense? But you can't prove that it has anything to do with sitting meditation. Just for most of us, we have to do a lot of seated meditation just to get through all the crap, the baggage we're carrying around with us.
Did he say that after sitting in Zazen for 7 years straight?
Yeah. And just as Dogen said, you don't have to go anywhere after coming back from China.
I brought it back to you.
Well, Michael.
Oh, well, I was just kind of drifting away a little bit on her question, because I think we were living in a day and time where debate has become a common way of how we communicate. And I was kind of taken back, because debate is something, I was taken back to someone who has studied it and was had a chat with me, and there are actually rules in debating. And one of the rules that I remember is you don't debate facts, you only debate opinions. And the problem in this day and age is that people present their opinions as facts. And that is sort of the way a master debater will kind of break down a debate and win it, actually. And I just find that kind of interesting, because especially with some of the messages that you share, is you really kind of stray away from having to present opinions as much as, and just, so that was actually just my 2 cents on sharing.
It's important you bring that, Mitch, your neck, but it's important you bring that up. It's coincident that in my Dharma Bite this month is the 5 W's: who, what, where, when, why, and then how. The reporters reporting the facts, right? You want to make sure you cover all those, if possible, in the first paragraph. And then if you look at why cannot be a fact. It's possible, but why is more likely a speculation. So why is an editorial, but who, what, when, where can all be reported factually. Then how is more of a scientific speculation. It explains cause, effect, and so forth like that. And why can be reduced to how, and so forth. And why becomes a who, you've got theism.
So which one is Zen concerned with?
What? What is it that thus comes? What is reality? What is the Zen question? In mo, that, pointing at Japanese in mo means thus, or that, it, what. What stated not as a question, but as what. Make sense?
Yes.
Dogen.
I think a primary problem here is that Zen is an experiential
Truth.
truth.
Yeah.
It is not a analytical, intellectual truth.
It's not a belief.
It is not a belief, and therefore, a debate, if you were to try to debate to me that my foot didn't hurt, I doubt you could be very successful no matter how good a debater you were.
But Buddha said we only imagine that our legs are in pain.
I agree with that, but then again, that is something you have to experience to know.
Yeah.
And so what I'm saying here is that you can debate till the end of time, you can do intellectual analysis till the end of time, but the only way you'll find the nature of Zen is by doing it and experiencing it.
And even then, we're skeptical as to experience, in air quotes, right?
Well, you may be, I'm not.
And I'm going to hand these to you. Just flip through and see which any of those you want to take. Zamai, you have the closing.
I had my one question.
Okay, Anna, did you have anything else?
No, I was just gonna. I was actually gonna ask you about these. So you already answered it for me.
Okay. So let's close with the 4 vows. Do you have the bell? And we'll be done with this. Glad we did it. Glad it's over. Two of those are my current Dharma talk. So
Where can we find them?
Michael, you should take one of my current Dharma talk because you asked questions about that.
Are they online?
It's the one that, yeah, it's going to be published in the newsletter.
Okay.
It's the one with Joe, what's his name from the television show, Just the Facts Man. What do they call it?
This one?
Yeah. That's it. Pass them down the other way. See if anybody else wants a copy. Don't take more than one copy, just one. Beings are numberless, I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. But a way is unsurpassable, I vow to realize it. Beings are numberless, I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. But a way is unsurpassable, I vow to realize it. Beings are numberless, I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. But a way is unsurpassable, I vow to realize it. Thank you for your patience and listening. Any follow-up questions you have, just contact me by email.
They're all gone?
Yeah. Anna, did you keep 2?
There's
No,
3
I
or 4
just
things
have
there.
one.
Just the one? It's just a big one, isn't it?
Anyone who's
Yeah.
going